to share the stage with a Katy Perry. Why did they leave it up to Lenny Kravitz and Missy Elliott? Now, the pyrotechnics was one of the things that really got the show over and secured that 1 million buys, in my opinion. If not for the pyrotechnics and the creative costumes that went behind the performance of Katy Perry, the Super Bowl halftime show probably wouldn't have gotten over as much as what it did, securing that 1 million buys that we saw for this year's Pepsi halftime show. So one of the things that really got it over for me this year was the pyrotechnic show that went with the performance of Katy Perry. Now, just to give you a bit of a statistical backdrop of info for the single Roar, it outbeat Lady Gaga's Applause by something like 250 to 300,000 downloads on iTunes and YouTube. That's a lot in terms of a statistical review and in terms of numbers. When you review both the singles from Lady Gaga and Katy Perry, I would have expected Lady Gaga to have dominated with downloads on iTunes, but one of the things that you have to notice about Katy Perry is every song that she comes out with, whether it be 1 to 2 years apart from the dropping of each individual single, every song from Katy Perry sounds different. And that's one thing that I really come to appreciate from Katy Perry, how different songs from her sound. And even though Roar was probably the only Katy Perry song that had a Super Bowl theme to it, you really have to appreciate how many times we hear that song and how many people still love it just a couple of years after it dropped. Now, when it dropped, it was huge. From Katy Perry, both the single and the music video were huge, and that's why it kicked off the set of songs she performed at the Pepsi halftime show this year, going along with the pyrotechnics and the creative costumes of sharks and beach balls, which really felt appropriate for the song Teenage Dream in that set. That was amazing, seeing that. It's beyond me why Juicy J didn't join Katy Perry on stage too. That was a real letdown when she started singing Dark Horse. I was expecting Juicy J to make an appearance on stage. Missy Elliott kind of making up for the absence of Juicy J, who had performed with Katy Perry for that song on a lot of award shows throughout 2013, 2014. So it really let me down that Juicy J didn't get in there. And how they tried, kind of just to combine today's music and 90s music together when they could have had someone far more effectively joining Katy Perry. Those were the only faults really I saw with this year's Super Bowl, but it did secure, despite all the criticism that we got for the game and the halftime show, it did secure that 1 million to 2 million buys, which is something you really have to appreciate, making it one of the biggest sporting events this year. And you can pretty much bet your last dime, if you would. The All-Star game for the National Basketball Association coming up in just a little under 2 weeks' time is not going to outperform the Super Bowl. It's not going to get nowhere near that 1 billion to 2 billion views that we saw for the Super Bowl just this past Sunday. It was such an exciting game. And the thing was, promotion for Katy Perry at the Super Bowl halftime show this year was blown out of proportion. So many people were talking about it, tweeting about it on Twitter. Syndicated radio shows and syndicated television networks were talking about kind of giving you the opportunity to tell us what song you wanted to see Katy Perry kick off the Pepsi halftime show with. Some of you were suggesting, the suggestions definitely variated. Some of you were suggesting Roar, others were suggesting Dark Horse, others were suggesting Teenage Dream. All those songs got in there, so songs you wanted to hear, you got in there. But some of you would have rather Katy Perry kicked it off with something different than Roar, because that was to be expected with how it had a Super Bowl theme to it. So I was really happy, everybody got what they wanted. But the suggestions were very interesting that was being posted by people on Facebook and Twitter. I really appreciated the diversity that came with that, and the promotion was amazing. Katy Perry was talking about it on her Facebook page, tweeting about it on Twitter. She had photos, she had backstage content and footage being thrown up on both her Facebook and Twitter. She was getting followers and subscribers on Twitter and Facebook all throughout the day of the Super Bowl. One of the interesting photos Katy Perry threw up was actually a photo of herself wearing a football jersey, of course, to promote the Super Bowl and her performance at the Pepsi halftime show just hours before it. And the pregame festivities, we got a lot of backstage footage and a lot of behind-the-scenes looks at Katy Perry's performances and the effort that went into comprising the performance behind the Pepsi halftime show. A lot of detail went into this. We have seen very detailed Pepsi halftime shows over the last number of years, probably the better part of the last 5 years. The detail and the pyrotechnics are really what got this one over. And if I were on the Pepsi Creative halftime show, I definitely would have suggested somebody different. But, in terms of pyrotechnics and just how the show was put off, it was definitely a grade A performance from Katy Perry. Now, if you're a diehard fan of music who have seen all these videos of Katy Perry's performance being reviewed by Calmness on YouTube, and you've come across this video, I want your opinion on it. If you're a diehard fan of music, and I'm talking directly to the diehard fans of music, did you appreciate the combination of music of today and the 90s from Katy Perry and Lenny Kravitz, or would you rather seen that done by two other effective artists rather than Katy Perry or Lenny Kravitz or Katy Perry and somebody else? As I mentioned here earlier on in the show, as you're writing your comments on our YouTube channel or tweeting them on Twitter or posting them on our Facebook page, it's beyond me why Katy Perry didn't share the stage with Carrie Underwood in a distribution of today's music in the pop charts and the music in the country charts. It's beyond me why Carrie Underwood, with how great of a job she did with the opening promo of this year's Super Bowl, singing the Super Bowl theme song, they didn't throw Katy Perry and Carrie Underwood together on stage, or they didn't choose somebody else. In my opinion, the music business can be summed up in two words, and that is Ariana Grande, first name Ariana, last name Grande, with how incredible of a following she has had, coming off her EP called Yours Truly about a year ago, and a year after that, dropping her debut album called Your Everything, featuring singles such as Problem, Break Free, and Bang Bang. All of those songs have gone to number one on the top 40 American Billboard chart. And coming up over the next 2 weekends, we're going to be seeing Ariana Grande starting off this weekend, performing at the Grammy Award show. And the following weekend, we're going to be seeing her at the NBA All-Star Game. So she's got a full schedule, and that's probably why she didn't perform at this year's Super Bowl halftime show. But in my opinion, that's how the music business can be described. It's not about Katy Perry anymore. This would have been more acceptable if it would have been about 2010 or 2011. That was when Katy Perry was last relevant, in my opinion. So the relativity behind Katy Perry has definitely been restored. That credibility and relativity has both been restored, with Katy Perry recently performing at the Pepsi halftime show with all the criticism she has received along with the game. You kind of got to question this. You kind of got to be skeptical on it. I was really skeptical on it. I didn't know how Katy Perry was going to be responded to by the over 75,000 to 80,000 fans in Arizona who attended the Super Bowl. It was sold out. There were millions of Katy Perry fans there, so she definitely got over. So she proved to still be relevant. But here in 2015, with who we have dominating the top 40 American Billboard chart and the country charts, people like Maroon 5, Iggy Azalea, Rita Ora, Nick Jonas. There are so many people dominating the top 40 American Billboard chart that should have performed at this year's Pepsi halftime show. Now, Nick Jonas, out of everybody dominating the top 40 American Billboard chart, would have been the top suggestion, in my opinion, although Jealous, his new single, has been doing really great. It's gone to number one on the top 40 American Billboard chart. But looking at some of the performers we have on the top 40 American Billboard chart, ranging anywhere from Nick Jonas all the way to Maroon 5, we've got Demi Lovato in there, Selena Gomez, Rita Ora, Iggy Azalea, as I just mentioned. There were so many people that should have headlined this year's Pepsi halftime show that hopefully will get the opportunity to do just that in coming years. We have a big one coming up next year, Super Bowl 50. They have to have just as impressive of a halftime show next year, and they have to find a way of topping it. Now, I know the creative team behind the Pepsi halftime show will find a way of doing it. You pretty much bet your last dime, if you would, they will find a way of doing it. But this year's Pepsi halftime show, like everything, had its good points and had its bad points. There are a lot of good things you could say about the Pepsi halftime show, but there are just as many things that you could find to say in the way of negativity towards the Pepsi halftime show. And I know there are those people out there that are choosing to look at it very negatively, because how does a costume of a beach ball and sharks fit into the Pepsi halftime show and the Super Bowl and the whole theme and the whole concept of the Super Bowl? I don't blame you for reviewing it negatively, like probably many of you have chosen to do. But I'm choosing to give the performance pretty much the benefit of the doubt. 85% of me, at least, is for the performance of Katy Perry, and the other 15% is somewhat against the performance of Katy Perry. So I'm kind of distributing it down the middle. I'm not all for the performance of Katy Perry, like probably some of you aren't. But so much of me is for it, and so much of me is against it. I'd say at least 85% of me was for it, and the other 15% was not so much, because there were so many people that you could have put in the place of Katy Perry to perform at this year's Pepsi halftime show. Because something interesting about the Pepsi halftime show this year was, yes, with how many Katy Perry fans tuned in and were in attendance at the actual Super Bowl game who bought a ticket just to see the Pepsi halftime show, with how many Katy Perry fans are out there and how many times the single Roar was both purchased on iTunes and download it, which, by the way, I would recommend purchasing a $25, anywhere from a $15 to $25 iTunes card just to pick up both the single and the album 4. It's definitely worth it. But with how many Katy Perry fans we did have out there, so many of those Katy Perry fans that did tune in, there were just as many who chose not to tune into the Super Bowl because they knew how drastic a performance that it could potentially been. Now, I think that she definitely proved the naysayers wrong, and that's a good thing for Katy Perry, because one of the biggest things was she proved to be still relevant here in 2015, which a lot of people fail to do. And that's a big thing for Katy Perry, because they'll be talking about her at this year's Grammys, which is coming up on Sunday night. So she's still relevant. That's one thing I really appreciate about her. And definitely, she's worthy of a Grammy nomination just for that performance alone, out of everything she did in 2014 and is still doing within the first few weeks of 2015. So coming off the Super Bowl, we have the Grammys and the NBA All-Star Game. And people now have more of a reason to talk about Katy Perry than they ever did. And millions of people are talking about her with the subscriber number she has on Facebook and the number of followers she has on Twitter, making her one of the most followed celebrities in the world. No some more in the way of someone like an